There we go.
Okay.
If you want to unmute yourself, we should be good. I will double check, but all right.
Representative Horman, it is wonderful to have you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're doing something a little bit different. Usually we would stream over YouTube, but I'm sorry, we would normally stream with Zoom. And today's you're kind of an inaugural test case, and we're going to be going over Facebook and in our YouTube channel. So, Wendy, it is so good to have you. And I think what works really well is give us a little bit of background, because you're mainly talking to our faculty, staff, and some students, and hopefully a few individuals from the public. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Great. Thank you, President. I live about half a mile from the college here over in Aman, and I was recruited into politics because of some volunteer work I had done in the public school system, specifically starting a fine arts program. Mm-hmm. I have 5 children in the system.
Right.
And at the time, and from there I was recruited to run for the Bonneville School Board, District 93. I spent 11 years serving there, and then was once again recruited into to running for the Idaho legislature. The people chose to elect me. I've been serving there for 8 years now. I am the vice chair of the Appropriations Committee. I'm co-chair of an Economic Outlook Committee, and I also serve on the Energy and Ethics Committees.
So what a wonderful background. I think, is this your 3rd term now? Fourth term, and you are unopposed.
This time I was. So
yeah, and that's wonderful. We're very pleased that you're unopposed. You have been an advocate for this college from the very beginning, and we'll talk about that in a second. But today's kind of a unique day, and we started by talking about this is September 11th, and that was 19 years ago. And I want you to reflect on 9/11, and also we're in COVID world now, and it's been about 6 months. And at least the way I think about it, both of these have been significantly changing our society. So I think you had some reflections on 9/11. So why don't you bring that up?
I tuned into the ceremony in New York this morning.
Yeah.
And as they read the individual names of over 3,000 people whose lives were lost that morning, it caused me to reflect on an experience I had. I went back to school when I was in my 40s to finish a degree in political science. And in one of my international relations classes, we were talking about Tiananmen Square. I was the only one in the room for whom that was a live memory and not something you read about in history books. For those who may not know, that was a demonstration in China led by students in 1989 who were seeking democratic changes to their form of government. And I realized this morning that 9/11 is something that all K-12 students and probably younger college-age students read about in history books as well. And it really impressed upon me the need for those of us for whom it is a live memory to be that link to events that have shaped this country and will continue to shape and change this country.
It is, and it is amazing. It's been 19 years. And, you know, as we think about that, literally high school juniors would have absolutely no awareness of it as part of their life. It would be history for them.
Yeah.
So one of the things, let's think about. Let's go back. What's it been? 6 years now, I guess, maybe more. So when I first came here, you're one of the first individuals I met. You and Mayor Casper, and you both had a vision for a community college. Now, I came from Oregon, and there are like 7-Elevens there. We have 17 community colleges in Idaho, but I moved for the startup of CWI, and then here at iTech. And you had an interesting vision for what 2-year community college would bring and do for the region. So what were you thinking at that time about that? Because you literally were one of the first individuals I talked to about a community college.
You know, I think it's been for decades, has been a desire of this community to
Right.
see ITech grow into a community college. But for one reason or another, that hadn't happened. So I was building on the desire of those who came before in my wish to see that happen as well, to see affordable education be made available to the students and the adults in this area. And when Mayor Casper was first, when she was campaigning, she made comments toward that effect. So almost immediately after she won, I called her and I said, okay, Rebecca, you made these comments. Let's get to work.
Exactly.
And so I set up some early meetings, and that evolved into a group
Right.
that then became hosted by Mayor Casper. A small group of interested citizens, and then you arrived on the scene
Mm-hmm.
and took our hopes and dreams and all the work we'd been doing for about a year and helped inform the community about the values of community college. Based on your experiences, and working together, we were able to persuade our community with over 70% in support of voting to help fund and support this college.
You know, I like to tell people I wasn't jaded enough because I'm not from here, but so many people said you're going to have to try this twice at least in order to get the bond to pass. And you know, you point out a 70% pass rate. That is phenomenal in our region to have something like that happen, and that really reflects on your vision and a whole lot of people that wanted to see this happen. So, well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's been my experience that the citizens in this community really value education, and they value educational value. And so when you make the proposition to them about the low investment and the potential benefit to our area in terms of students and workforce development and in meeting the needs of employers, I think they saw that value proposition and decided it was worth the cost to do. Now, of course, we were gifted from the state the property and the buildings,
Sure.
and that made launching this an incredible value proposition for the citizens of our area, and they saw that and came out to support it.
It was. In fact, you might agree with this, but as I'm in the community, I'm trying to find somebody who voted against it. It seems like maybe there's amnesia there, if in fact they did. But to everybody that I've connected with really appreciates the value of a community college. And you know, the three areas primarily that we look at would be the career technical, so 2 years to a technical job, and then the unique part of what we do is 2 years into a junior at a university, and we like to say we're hoping to send those students without debt. So a well-trained, well-prepared junior going into our universities, and of course Michelle Holt and all of this work in workforce development. So as you look at where we are now, and we mentioned before we started, the college is up 7%, and for the universities, a lot of them are hope to be flat or maybe slightly negative for a whole bunch of reasons. But what are you seeing in what we're doing now that you kind of expected or glad to see? Or
yeah. Well, I think you know, this idea, the community gave us a gift of a blank slate.
They did. In
creating an institution, and you, President Aman, your staff, the students have really painted a beautiful picture that starts with your faculty and staff here, Anne-Marie Peters, and the partnerships that she's developed with employers and philanthropists to benefit the work. Michelle Holt and her work in workforce development, them really going out and finding what the needs of our employers are in this area and then customizing programs to meet those needs. Higher education is not well known for being that nimble. And yet you have taken this blank canvas that the community gifted to this institution and created that level of innovation and commitment. One of my all-time favorite books is The End of Average by Todd Rose.
Right.
And he talks about there's no such thing as an individual student. And you'll like it because he uses a pilot example to talk about that.
Sure.
With some phenomenal stats. I highly recommend that book. But I believe that's what you've done here. You have taken and built an institution that shows that you care about individual student success. Whether that is your graduation rate, the most recent number I could find was 54%. That's almost double, or in some cases more than double, other community colleges in the state of Idaho. It's the second highest among all public institutions in the state of Idaho. That shows you're caring about individual students and helping them succeed. The innovative transfer agreements that you have with other institutions, higher ed institutions, that allows individuals who may not have expertise navigating a system, you've made that as simple as possible for them through those agreements that you've created, innovative ones. I see it when I attend CEI graduation, and I see high percentages of underrepresented students walking across that stage. It shows in the way that you choose to run your budget. When you come to the legislature and ask for funding, it's based on a specific request. If we can get these funds, we can graduate students who will meet these employer needs in our area. And I think that's what the legislature is looking for. They're looking for that value out of higher education that connects to the workforce and employer needs. And CEI is certainly ahead of the curve in all of those areas.
So I don't know if you feel like reflecting on this. So again, 9/11 and COVID have changed the way we do business. And how do you think COVID, now that we're right in the middle of this and maybe understanding it a bit, what's that done to post-secondary education? How do you think we ought to act differently in Idaho, knowing the complexities of COVID? Or what do you think's changing there?
I think, coming back to this theme from The End of Average, recognizing that students are individuals and shouldn't be viewed as just a cog in the system or a person sitting in a classroom. Stealing a little bit from the K-12 space, Clark County, Las Vegas, Nevada, has about the same amount of K-12 students that Idaho has, about 300,000. They've had no contact with them, over 50,000 of them in the first 3 weeks of virtual school.
Yeah.
Los Angeles, they have a kindergarten enrollment, about 14,000 students. That they were anticipating just aren't there. And so I think COVID is helping us recognize students as individuals. You could be sitting in a physical classroom though and have a student sitting on the back row that's missing because they're not engaged. And so I think one of the silver linings from this experience will be forcing us to recognize that we need to make the system work for individual students and not the other way around. We shouldn't be forcing students to fit into a system that has all kinds of variability right now in particular. And I do believe I hope it will be one of the silver linings of this experience as it changes our mindset to recognize those missing students or even the present students and how we can meet their individual needs.
So you're a big advocate of online learning. And as we started, I mentioned that we have about a third of our students on campus. And I think you're bringing up a good point, because we know some of these students want a face-to-face experience, and they're willing to have a little bit of a risk to come on campus, and we're using face coverings and disinfecting everything. We're spreading everyone by 6 feet, and we're the world's least efficient school, as everybody's least efficient, because a classroom of 30 really only holds 12 when you do this. But then 2/3 are online, and we're using Zoom and other mechanisms like that. But what do you think from a state level, the advantages of online, and why do you like that as a modality?
Mm-hmm. I was an early adopter. One of my own children, they canceled the digital photography class at our high school here, Hillcrest, right here, and he really wanted to take digital photography. So I went out and found him an online course, and it was so eye-opening to me, because he felt that he had such a personal relationship with his digital photography teacher. This teacher was Idaho certified, but he lived in Pennsylvania. But he called my son. He emailed my son. He communicated in community boards with my son and gave him individual feedback on his photos.
Right.
And so I saw early on through my own children how relationships can actually be enhanced in an online setting versus him sitting in the back row of a classroom, a physical classroom, and really not causing trouble, not, doing fine, doing well, but not developing that individual relationship with his teacher. And then I experienced it myself when I went back to school. I saw that it was possible to have very high quality online experiences, sometimes to exceed that of a face-to-face experience, depending on the course and the instructor and such things. But so I've known for years now that quality can be there in an online setting, and some of the research is quite clear that a blended setting actually can and does produce better results than either exclusively online or exclusively face-to-face. And so I think there are ways we can figure out how to deliver that kind of education that's flexible, allows students to access it on their own schedules rather than, Monday, Wednesday, Friday,
right.
9 to 10, that just doesn't work for a lot of our students anymore. And so again, we need to make the system adapt to meet individual needs rather than forcing them into our ways of doing things.
I really like that. And I think that our average age is about 26, which means these are working professionals in a lot of cases. And what is it that we can do? Because not everybody can come to class at 11 o'clock on a Friday and be available. The other interesting thing, I think you have been a fan of IRN, Idaho Regional Optical Network, and that has been visionary and has really paid off for the state of Idaho and us in particular. What do you think about rural Idaho, and what role do you think we ought to play? We have 9 counties in our region, and of course a lot of those are rural, Salmon and Driggs and those kind of places. What do you think we should be doing with them?
One of the most profound statements I heard during the last legislative session came from a student who was speaking at a ceremony honoring the 100-year anniversary of women receiving the right to vote.
Right.
She was talking about a study abroad experience she had, and this was pre-COVID. She said, "I no longer see school as a place, but an experience."
Wonderful. Maybe we'll steal that from you. That's insightful.
That is profound in terms of rural Idaho.
Sure.
Right? If you can get the infrastructure in place like IRN or municipal broadband or any high quality broadband, you can connect students to high quality instruction. You can connect them to the supercomputer out here at Idaho National Laboratory. You can connect students to training they might not be able to get inside a classroom. And so I have high hopes that through technology we can bring customized education experiences to individual students, regardless of where they are.
We've talked about this, and Vice President Lori Barber, and I talk all the time about skills, sometimes over degree. And I don't know, you want to make a comment about degrees are always important. We all have baccalaureates or masters or PhDs, and they're important, but maybe not essential.
This comes back to this idea of higher education becoming more nimble.
Right.
I was on a webinar not long ago where some major employers in the state of Idaho were listing out their needs for employees. And interestingly enough, the first list that popped up about those was related to skills, not certificates, not diplomas.
Isn't that great?
Not degrees.
Yeah.
And so the workforce has already long shifted to skills. And we need to make sure that our students coming out of higher education are equipped with that skill set. You've had some phenomenal ideas here around secure operation centers for internet or cybersecurity issues.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, a student who's coming out of that class is probably going to be employable the minute they finish the class. Hopefully they'll stay and finish the certificate or the degree or transfer.
We want them to do that because legislators like those degrees. We have the little thermometer, right?
That's how desperate employers are for employees, though, is once they get those skills. And so I think that's a conversation higher ed needs to have about that value proposition in delivering skilled workforce to the employers and adjusting our welding program, as you have done to meet local needs, adjusting the machining programs, adjusting cybersecurity, adjusting those programs to make sure the students are not only leaving with a piece of paper that says they have a diploma, but a skill that will enable them to get a job.
Yeah, exactly. So have we given you a tour of the Yellowstone building yet? Have you seen the cybersecurity and Michelle Holt's workforce?
No, because the COVID pandemic hit just as I was returning from the legislature.
We will do that when life settles down a bit. But I'm glad you brought up a SOC, a Secure Operations Center. So the legislature had allocated, it initially was $1 million and went to 950. So we were able to get the 4 community colleges and LCSC about 50,000 each to create a Secure Operations Center. Those things are so wonderful because now our students, our technicians are going to see what they see at Idaho Central Credit Union or ERMAC or the lab or Melaleuca, where there is where you can visually see the networks and see where there are potential threats. And we can do that at the college. Iron becomes absolutely critical for us to connect with the lab. And we can get sanitized traffic that comes across that real time for our students. And those are simulations. And this whole thing boils down to skills, exactly like what you described.
And these are examples that enable me to go back to work in January when the legislature reconvenes and say, look at the investment, this $1 million investment that we appropriated. Look at what the result has been now for students all over the state of Idaho. So thank you for thinking of specific ways to use those funds that directly benefits student skills or skills that students need to get jobs. That makes my job easier when I go back to defend funding for.
Well, you're a huge advocate, not only for us, but for education as a whole, whether it's K-12 or the university and community college system. And STEM is interesting to you as well. And what do you think about the go-on rate? What do you think we ought to be doing here in Eastern Idaho?
That is a tough nut to crack. I worry that we are asking the wrong question. If you come back to this idea that there's no average student, well, there's no average institution either. And yet so many of the things upon which we base the system are based on averages, grade point averages, average daily attendance, funding formulas that are based on 3-year averages. Well, what do you do if you're a new and growing institution?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a 3-year average.
We don't.
And so this concept of treating students as individuals and making the system work for them also applies to individual institutions. And so rather than hitting for some sort of average percent of folks going on, I'm inclined to say let's support individual students and get all of them out of the system, not by focusing on them as individuals rather than shooting for maybe something that's an arbitrary number or average.
Well, a 60% goal is pretty aggressive, but again, as we talk about skills, not everybody needs a baccalaureate. And I think I'm sure you do, that all of the programs that we have here have the criteria of at least a family wage job. So we are not training individuals to be dishwashers or those kind of things. We're talking about welding, machine tool, auto, diesel, cyber, networking. All of these are well into the family wage jobs, and all of them would have a path into a baccalaureate. And I think that's one of the. I don't want to speak for you, but I think this is true, that if we do our job right at a 2-year level, that student has a path into a baccalaureate if ultimately they want to do it. Nursing is a classic example of that.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And I think that's part of the innovation and the pivoting that higher ed needs to do in terms of making sure that the programs and services they're providing lead in that direction.
So I see that Chairman Price is on, and he wishes you well. So he.
Hello, good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to have Park on. We have trustees pop up regularly in these, and it's good to have them support us. Talk a little bit about the talent pipeline. The lab is kind of the big elephant in the region, really important. 9 major projects that we know of. Mm-hmm. What role do you think we ought to be playing in that?
Well, I'm thrilled that the state has made that a priority as well. I serve on the LINE Commission, which stands for Leadership in Nuclear Energy.
Yes,
and
yes.
They have become a group that really advocates for the lab, the missions that the lab has, because as you know, they're the 6th largest private employer in the state of Idaho.
Yes.
So it's not just Eastern Idaho that benefit from the work that happens there. So I think anything we can do to connect and support students to those careers benefits not only this area, but the state, certainly the world, and even globally with some of the Homeland Security missions that they have out there.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And I think you and I have talked about one of the areas we haven't started in, because you can't do everything first, but energy is important. And we have some state-of-the-art battery technology at the lab. And renewable energies, whether it's wind or solar, only works when the wind is blowing or the sun is shining. So battery becomes exceedingly important. And as we think about a future tech building and the kind of things that would go into it, energy is really important. And then you build a building that would take that into account. So the infrastructure is built around that. They call them LEED buildings.
And you've taken tremendous steps already in the direction of those types of things. For example, the nuclear quality certification program that was specifically requested several years ago, again, tied to a specific outcome. I think that's how you secure support for buildings or programming that are needed by making those direct connections. And that's one of the things that you do so well here.
Well, thank you. Let's talk about legislators for a second. And a number of us meet with legislators. We've got
Mhm.
great legislators here in Eastern Idaho, and give us some tips. Give us some tips as how should we act around you all, and what's the proper thing to do, and how do we let our needs known without being obnoxious?
Yeah, no, we're individuals too. Yes, we're part of the legislature, but we are individuals too. I can't do my job unless I hear from you and know what this institution needs. I can't do my job unless I hear from citizens, from parents, from students about what those needs are. And so it's really important to develop those relationships. And forgive us if we miss your email. Sometimes I will receive hundreds of emails in one day,
of course,
and with no staff to help us sort through them. But if we fail to respond to an email, send it again and get it at the top of our inbox. But really, it's about just getting to know one another, so that I can learn from you and incorporate what those expressed needs and concerns are into the work I do as a public official.
So JFAC is so important. So the Joint Financial
Joint Finance and
Appropriations Committee. It's wonderful having you on that. That is kind of the last step toward funding for all of us that would be public institutions. So I really appreciate that you're serving there and the importance it is. It's complex. So what do you, the concept of outcomes-based funding has come up multiple times. So again, for some of our faculty and staff, there are a number of ways of getting funded. Maybe I'll have you describe those, but talk about the difference between outcomes-based funding, line items, and then just the general fund that we get, CTE funds. Talk about how the stew gets made at the legislature and funds are allocated, because this is important to us.
So right now, Idaho has in place a decades-old funding formula for higher education that, again, is based on 3-year rolling averages, which is problematic if you don't
have a 3-year rolling
average. You haven't. And so this next year will be our year. We will have one, but again, this pandemic has exposed the problem of funding on those kind of bases. It's just not practical anymore. We really shouldn't be paying institutions to just have people spend time sitting in chairs. Number one, they're not sitting in chairs anymore.
Not today.
Number two, we need to get more real time with it and start rewarding institutions for successful outcomes rather than inputs. And it's complicated, but it's not impossible. And we do need to figure those things out if we hope to help you transition to the more nimble institutions that we hope to see.
So I'm part of the 8 presidents that are trying to come up with a proposal. Tell me, just in your opinion, do you like the idea of line items? Line items would be each institution brings a particular project and asks for funding for those. Outcomes-based funding, of course, is so much per degree or certificate produced. That's a way to do it. What do you think a reasonable way in higher ed, that if we're going to transition away from this decades-old, we'll give you what you had last year. Mm-hmm. How should we be thinking about that as presidents?
Yeah, so this year in particular, it really doesn't matter what I think of line items, because they pretty much have been banned for the current year. Now our revenue is coming in shockingly high.
I was going to bring that up. I'm glad that you disclosed that.
It's actually coming in higher than we had predicted pre-COVID.
Wow.
Which is just really stunning, and it really begs the question of us digging in to understand what's going on with those revenues. You know, we had some pretty significant individual income tax cuts several years ago that contributed to a dip. Then we had a difference in the withholding patterns that also were new, and nobody knew how they would affect revenue. But we've come back full steam ahead. And so it will be interesting to observe how the governor chooses to budget. Now, 2 months of revenue into the current fiscal year does not a trend create.
It does not.
And it's very difficult to know right now how much of that is related to, maybe stimulus checks or the loans that small businesses were given that it kind of propped up, actually really effectively propped up the Idaho economy. We don't know of another state that has revenue like we do right now. Again, is ahead of pre-COVID estimates. And so it will be, I think the term the governor's office is using is cautiously optimistic, and I count myself in that category. 2 months worth of revenues that's may or may not be related to one-time events. It is good news, but we'll see how things look in January and go from there.
Okay, no, I think that's fair. And coming out of the gate, we all expected significant unemployment, and Idaho didn't participate in that. We've got greater unemployment than we thought, but not the 40%.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we do at a community college, and because I'm familiar with that, especially in Oregon, where we saw businesses that would close, and it's that dislocated worker project, and the 2-year community colleges are uniquely positioned to help those students with quick skill sets that could get them employed or give them retraining or training in a new field. And I think all 4 of us are ready to look at that when the time comes.
I saw some interesting statistics on that just recently, and it was trend lines between those who were expecting to lose their job or be furloughed and expect to regain their job. The numbers in Idaho just haven't panned out like some of them have nationally. I think we are resilient state. We are very committed to self-reliance and working hard. And I think you're seeing that people here want to work. They want to be productive.
They do.
And I think they're anxious to get back to work. And if that means some reskilling or some upskilling, I think our community colleges are very well positioned to help deliver that.
So what do you think, could you pick a couple of programs that you think that would be interesting for us to look at? I'm kind of dropping this out of the blue on you, but where do you think trends might be going in areas that we may not be thinking about? You're there in Boise and talking with your colleagues, and where do you think the sweet spots are for this kind of training?
I have to say I am learning from you folks here, quite candidly. I think you're on top of this by setting up things like secure operations centers.
Yeah.
We hear continually that the jobs of the future we can't even prepare students for right now because we don't know what they are. And as I see you all develop these partnerships, have close relationships with employers, I see that based on that, you developed a secure operations center. Well, that helps me know, okay, that's a need that employers have. And so I think you all are on the cutting edge of doing those types of things, and you're doing it by having those communication lines open.
Good. Well, thank you. That's a
so
wonderful
cybersecurity,
compliment.
certainly nuclear is a prominent thing.
Sure.
We need baseload energy supply. We're seeing happen in California right now.
We are.
When you don't have baseload energy.
Right.
And so I think you all are right on top of those emergent and actually not even that emergent at this point, right? It's happening around us. So I think you're right on top of that.
So what do you think, is there a threat, that's not a very good word, but to the region as more and more individuals people come into, especially the Idaho Falls, this corridor here, because of all of the changes at the lab, whether it's the naval reactors or the cleanup projects or small modular reactors, we're going to see an influx of people. And I don't know, maybe that's a good thing, and maybe we can't control it particularly. We know it's going to happen. So what do you think about that?
I think it's a great opportunity. There are reasons we all live here in eastern Idaho, and I think we want to do everything that we can to preserve the lifestyle that keeps us all here, that we love, a low cost of living. There's a blue sky out that window right now. I'm seeing pictures from my daughter in the San Francisco Bay Area. The sky is orange.
It is.
And so I think, while we work to preserve the things that we love about this area, there are opportunities that will improve our lifestyle and improve our economy as we go about them thoughtfully and in ways that enhance what we already have versus, detract or destroy it.
So one of the interesting things that we're going to be working on would be trades and construction. So we know that there will be a lot of construction out in the desert. We know that people who move here need homes and businesses. So just a lot of construction. The college hasn't gotten into that, whether it's HVAC, electrical, just plain framing, masonry kind of work. Welding, of course, all of those are areas that I think the college could expand into, and we probably need to look at that, trying to skate to where the puck is going to go.
Agreed. And I've been in meetings where I can see that you're headed in that direction, and I think it's a wise path.
Well, good, thank you. We're approaching our 45 minutes, Wendy. This goes really quickly. So one of the things I like to ask all of our guests is just give us some tips. You've been in leadership roles for a long time, and I know you think about this. You're a very thoughtful person. So could you give us 3 principles that you think would be interesting to our faculty and staff?
Sure. One of the early principles I learned in some of the leadership training I was in, while I was serving on my local school board here, I also became president of the Idaho School Boards Association, and received some phenomenal leadership training there. And one of the things that I took away from one of those was vision by design.
I like that.
And it's about having a vision of where you want to go and what you hope to see. But by design is where all the work happens.
It does.
You have to know the details. You have to know the data. You need to know the people. And that's how you get to big picture solutions that can really help people solve the challenges that they're facing. So that's been one of my
I like that
kind of unspoken guiding principles. I don't have any quotes of that hanging up anywhere, but it was an early lesson for me. One of the other principles that guides me really is a word that's getting a little bit worn at this point, but it's innovation, right? Be the future that you hope to create, or if you want to see this future, create it.
Sure.
And so I think I mentioned earlier, I was an early adopter with online learning.
Yeah.
I tend to be an early adopter of
you are
promising ideas like let's build a community college.
Right.
And so that has served me well, because I think people like to have good ideas about where we can go, and ideas that have served us well in the past. How can we adapt them to serve us well in the future? The other thing I guess I would suggest is just be authentic. I'm not smart enough to figure out how to be 2 different people in 2 different places. And I have come to find that that's something people appreciate in leaders is authenticity.
Is there anything I should have asked you that I didn't?
No.
We covered a lot of topics.
We covered a lot of
45
ground.
minutes.
I think the upcoming legislative session will be interesting to observe. Based on how the special session turned out. I will never criticize people though for coming out to speak their voices out, and they can expect to face consequences if they're not playing by the rules, whether they're blocking our doors so we can't get in or whatever. But I hope you never hear me criticize a citizen for coming to the Capitol.
You never have. You've been nothing but inviting to that. That's important. So again, we are so pleased that we know you're going to be back in that chair in January. So Representative Horman, thank you so much for spending some time with the college.
Thank you. It's been good to be here. And thanks for all you're doing, Paul.
I appreciate it.